This video is dedicated to one of my Parlay certified patrons, the Greatersea. You too can get a video every month if you join the Greatersea as a $9 monthly patron on patreon.com/zandypants. Now, behold, the Greatersea asks, what do you think about restructuring Rivens to be more like corrupted mods, with just one positive and one negative stat, and perhaps along with that allowing for more specific and conditional bonuses? Well, overall, I feel like since Rivens are in a weird spot and don't fulfill their goals, I'm up for a lot of changes to Rivens. So I'm going to approach this question in two ways. First of all, do I think that on its own it would solve the problems with Rivens and fulfill their stated design goals? And then two, do I think it would make them more fun? We're going to focus on those two things. So first of all, do I think that this helps Rivens fulfill their stated design goal? Sort of, maybe not on its own. So giving the Riven one positive and one negative stat, I think this allows Rivens to have more of a huge single positive stat to justified by that negative and the randomness. And that kind of helps in the sense that if a weapon has a fatal flaw, you can get this huge amount of this one stat, and it is often one stat that will fix it, you know? But it also kind of damages some of the currently functioning goals of Rivens. For example, there are a lot of weapons that want to use a Riven to get a bit of extra status chance and push themselves that extra little bit up to fulfill their distributed status chance 100% before additional multi-shot thing. And having just one stat makes that a little bit less potent because it means that you often get more than you need. You know, you run the element to your choice and then you want the rest of the status. You often don't need like 200% status. You know, you're all right with having a little bit less. So having it divided among other stats is kind of a good thing. So it wouldn't always be good for defining a weapon's niche or changing a weapon's niche or giving a weapon a niche, but I think in some cases it would. There are plenty of weapons where they just have a stat that is way too low and they need a gigantic boost to really become viable, and unless we had Rivens with flat stat boosts, then that's not going to happen. So big stat boost for one stat could totally work. And having them always have a negative could potentially make the negatives a bit more of an aspect of Rivens, whereas now some Rivens don't even have negatives. You know, we have the 2 stat ones that are both positive, 3 stat, 2 positive, 1 negative, and then 4 stat, 3 positive, 1 negative. So no more purely positive Rivens, and that could be a good thing. I don't know. I definitely think that it could make Rivens a bit easier to evaluate. You wouldn't look at a Riven with 2 positive stats and be like, well, that's definitely just better, even though the Rivens with 3 positive stats and 1 negative are often better. The values can be higher, you know, whatever. So this would make it a bit clearer. So sure, but again, whether or not they would make Rivens make weapons better or like have a new niche, I feel like it's a mixed bag on its own. Now, you did mention allowing for more specific and conditional bonuses. This is one of my proposed changes for Rivens. I think the 3 things that would really help Rivens would be the ability to give flat stat boosts, which would actually fix weapons that are bad. The ability to lock in stats, that one is pretty self-explanatory and basically everybody agrees. And the ability to curate the stats. So basically have our developers, or maybe even we could, instead of locking in a stat, we can pick from what stats we want to roll for. Like instead of locking a stat that won't move, we just remove a stat from the pool. But what I usually mean is I would like our developers to just make a curated list of stats that are tailored for the weapon. So for the Javelok, it won't be able to get some stat bonuses that just don't really do anything, and it will be able to get some that are more relevant. So flight speed is more relevant, magazine size is relevant for the throw, you know, crit is relevant, it's a bit inconsistent, status is still pretty good, you know, whatever, right? And that gives the weapons a bit of identity back, and it also means that even if you can't lock in stats, you're more likely to get something good or at least something relevant, you know, that does something for the weapon. Like fire rate would be pretty awkward for the Javelok, and we could just take that out. And then not only do you not get that stat, and that's a bummer if you get it randomly, it also means you're more likely to get something that isn't a bummer. So, you know, good. And I do think that if Rivens were limited to being 1 positive stat and 1 negative stat, it would be kind of easier to curate and balance Riven's stat like that. So I don't know. I mean, that might help. So I feel like that's pretty much all the analysis of whether or not it would fulfill the goals of Rivens on their own. Now, adding more specific and conditional bonuses, I do think that would help a lot. I think that would be more fun, and I think it would be just like a better system that makes Rivens make more of a difference. And in conjunction with this corrupted change, yeah, that might make it a bit easier to do. But again, I think the reason we're not getting this is simply that it's considered to be a lot of work, and indeed, I'm not saying it wouldn't be a lot of work, but yeah, so I don't know. But now, on to whether or not I think it would make them more fun. I do think it would make them more fun. I think that having that single huge bonus, again, that makes you feel the Riven more. Not only does it make it more likely that you're going to, actually fix the weapon's problem without flat sats added to the weapon, but it also means that you're just going to notice more. If you, instead of getting a Riven that's just an overall upgrade Riven, they have this sort of broad upgrade. It's a Rivened weapon. We don't really say like what the Riven is. People don't talk about that so much. And that sucks. It'd be much cooler if it was like, oh, this is a weapon that has a huge crit chance Riven, where normally this weapon is a bit coin flippy with its crits, but now it's got like over 100% crit chance and it's totally different. Like that would be really interesting and you'd really feel it. Or like this is like 300% status chance on like a single fire weapon, and it goes from being like you practically never get a status proc to you literally always get a status proc, and then that's way different, right? That would be cool, and I think you'd really feel that in gameplay more. Again, even for things like flight speed, like you have a throwing knife weapon and you get 500% flight speed and they just go flying. They're basically hit scan. And that would be really different, right? So I think it would make them more fun in the sense that by consolidating the stat points, which is kind of what I'm assuming would happen, you get a stat bonus that is much bigger and more singular and really defines the weapon. One kind of secondary problem with Rivens at the moment is that they kind of ruin a weapon's identity sometimes, or give it a new one at best, but... and this would kind of lessen the blow there. You could potentially kind of ruin a weapon's identity, but you would give it more of a firm identity of a certain kind by giving it all of one stat. I like that. And overall, I do like negatives, personally. I think that it's really satisfying when they become a good thing, and it's also satisfying to sort of negate them by circumstance. This is complicated to talk about, but like let's say you're using the synth set already, but you have a big negative reload, so that saves you because the synth set auto reloads and you don't have to worry about using your very long reload, and you kind of get around that by using your loadout. I think that would be cool, having more negatives as long as they mattered. Again, like that's where the curating stats comes in. I think that would be a good thing overall. So, yeah. Corrupted Riven mods, basically corrupted mods, but random, I think it might be kind of fun. It might be interesting. It would solve a few problems. I don't think it's perfect, but an interesting solution. Definitely not a direct solution on its own, but curating those specific and conditional bonuses, maybe even giving them bonuses unique to the weapon, like practically an augment that is hidden in the Riven. I feel like that makes it even more of a shame that they're random, but it could still be really fun. Again, that's one of my big proposed changes to sort of help Rivens along. I've been Zandy, and I want to thank the Greatersea once again for their support on Patreon. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have something to take care of.